is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Monday, February 19th, 2018. I got my years and my dates all screwed up. And I have a special guest. Juan Carlos Bagnell is here. Hi, how are you, Juan?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm really stoked to be on the show. I've been listening for a while. I'm glad to finally make the roster.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it. This is a bit of a crazy day because I'm flying out to Europe this evening, first to see my family in France and then off to Barcelona for MWC. So it's a little hectic, but I'm glad you could join us. So do you want to tell everybody where they can find you? I mean, we're going to obviously plug ourselves at the end, but
oh, I've been all over the place. So
you have. That's why I wanted to make sure that I've got the right info.
For people interested in the mobile tech conversation for the last 2 years, I've been a senior editor at Pocketnow.com. I'm still running their podcast, but I've also started broadening my tech horizons, and I'm hosting a weekly show with Newegg, talking about PC building, DIY, and gaming hardware. So we do a live broadcast every Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific at Newegg also. So I'm kind of spreading my tech horizons there, both mobile and desktop and laptop, getting all the fun goodies, getting to play with all the fun gear again.
Awesome. You see, I knew there was more than Pocketnow. That's why I didn't want to pigeonhole you by saying Pocketnow. As you also know, well, my listeners, I do write for Pocketnow from time to time as well. So, it's kind of like a family reunion in little ways.
Oh, definitely.
I know. It's awesome. So we have some topics. I'm going to let you pick the first one if you have the podcast topics up and ready. You go ahead then.
So, one of the things that I actually wanted to kick off with was just that little bit of business news where you linked the HTC president, smartphone business president. That's a good one.
Resigning. Yeah. I like that.
Because I think we've both been dancing around some conspiracy theory-esque hypotheses over what might become of our beloved HTC. It was a brand that got me into mobile tech. I'm actually revisiting an old Windows Mobile PDA from back in the day that has the HTC branding all over it. But of late, it seems like this is a company that's getting ready to be piecemealed.
Well, I've been saying this for a while, You've heard that, and some people call me crazy. Look, it's not what I wish was happening. Don't get me wrong. I want a healthy HTC to be around us, with us for a while. But the reality is that I could see this one coming. The writing seemed to be on the wall for me. I don't know. What does it mean, though? They could still be making phones. Who knows, right?
Well, I think, there was I forget who your guest was, and I apologize for that. But there was a recent conversation about just sort of HTC in general, circa the Google acquisition, where when you have such a huge chunk of your design talent being packed up and moved to another company, we can be pretty confident that there's still probably another 2 years of phones in HTC's design pipeline. A U12, maybe a U13, some notes on what that might have resembled. But that seems to me like the right time frame to figure out what to do with their patent portfolio, to figure out what to do with the Vive. What to do with their virtual reality segment of their business. And then the spirit of HTC phones will just live on at Google. Maybe this becomes a brand kind of like the Nokia label, where it can be licensed and applied to entry-level or mid-ranger devices, something like that. I just don't see a lot of future left for HTC as a standalone premium device manufacturer. And this move, another smartphone president resigning, another top tier executive leaving the company, I think kind of reinforces the notion that this brand label probably won't represent a premium option for much longer.
Yeah. The reality is I'm sure we'll get a U12, but after that, it's all big question marks, right?
Well, and definitely, and we're still yet to see whether or not their current strategy can excite any consumers in this mobile space. A number of manufacturers are facing very similar challenges. If it's LG, if it's Moto, how do you justify premium pricing in an era of $800, $900,000 phones and compete against companies like Apple and Samsung that can demand that kind of price premium. I don't think any of them have really done a good job of answering that question for consumers.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm torn. I mean, on one hand, maybe we won't miss HTC because they'll relive within the Pixel brand in some super awesome way, right? But at the same time, I'm just, call me old fashioned, but it's the end of an era. It's kind of like, like when Nokia and BlackBerry kind of disappeared for a while, right? I mean, maybe they'll come back. Maybe somebody's going to acquire the rights to HTC. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, it's definitely what I would prefer to see is sort of retreading what made HTC so special as a smartphone brand. I think HMD is doing a good job of bringing us back to what that Nokia label represented, especially before Microsoft acquired them. If someone could do that with HTC, if we had leadership that I felt was up to the task at HTC to rejoin that conversation, I think I wouldn't feel quite so dour. But it really does feel like the people who were making exciting design decisions at the company are now probably under Google's purview. And that's great for Pixel fans, from out of the Nexus era into the Pixel phone era. I think if we could have that kind of cohesive design brand strategy with Google's resources, that's definitely going to be a boon for smartphone fans. But at the same time, I wonder if this isn't just more evidence that we're rapidly approaching, if not already starting to be
the beginning of the end.
The post-smartphone world. This is such a ubiquitous commodity of a gadget, not the exciting vanguard product that it used to be. Where's the next excitement going to come from if it's not from the glowing rectangles that we keep in our pockets?
Well, I think this is going to be a while. I mean, I was just having a conversation about this with someone, how, the voice UI, right? The Google Assistant, Alexa. Oh no, she's gonna go off. And series of the world are going to, are going to become like permeate our homes and our offices and our cars. I'm sure too eventually. And that is a natural interface. Like, it's so easy for you to talk to the computer, and it's kind of very Star Trek. But I think that is the reality of a big chunk of our future. But that doesn't mean to me that the phone's going to disappear, simply because in the same way as the laptop and even the desktop hasn't disappeared, there is a tool for the right thing. And some of us are set in our ways and our habits, and we're happy pecking away at a piece of glass. That piece of glass might change shapes and be thinner and maybe translucent and transparent and whatever, and maybe the compute power will shift to another device on our bodies or to the cloud for all we know. But it doesn't matter, right?
I completely agree with that. I think one of the things that, especially those of us who are fans of this kind of mobile kit, we've been in PDA space and in smartphone space, since the dawn of Palm versus, Windows Mobile or something like that. It's not to get too hung up on, do I think the phone is going away? Because we technically live in a post-PC era, and yet look at the excitement.
The PC hasn't really gone away.
Yeah, the PC, not only has the PC not gone away, but we've never seen more excitement regarding things like blockchain technologies and gaming tech. They were saying the console wars had decided the fate of the PC a decade ago, and yet the PC keeps coming back to reign supreme in the era of like competitive gaming.
It's a zombie we can't kill.
Totally. So what I mean by like the post-smartphone era is one where we sort of take that part of the gadgetry for granted, in a way where now the next exciting phase might be something like Intel's Vaunt.
Absolutely.
That's an exciting step towards interacting with data and services in a way that we can't replicate with a slab of glass that has a battery that lives in our pocket. Maybe the social interactions change so that we're not always blocking the world around us with a glowing rectangle, and we move on to, like you were saying, better audio interfaces, something like the movie Her. Like where we can have these sort of meaningful audio interactions, short form interactions with our content. Maybe we have that at a glance notification that smartwatches promised us and never delivered, but we could have that up at eye level. And maybe we fix some of the issues we have with things like distracted driving. When we don't have this glowing screen in our lap, we can put that information up where it's more easily digestible. And so that's what I mean is it's not that the smartphone's going away, but maybe you just have a brain that lives in your pocket and you interact with all of your data
in a different way.
In different ways. Yeah. In more organic ways for the human condition.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's my point. I think I was trying to get to is that so I think the voice interface is exciting because it removes the interface, right? You just talk and it'll get better and better to the point where, it'll just be second nature. But at the same time, we might not need our phones all the time anymore in the same way as we don't necessarily use our laptops and desktops as much ananymore.
Exactly. It becomes more of a specialized solution for a very particular type of interaction.
Exactly. And the reason for that is because, as you said, was AR glasses on our noses or on our faces. You're just going to be able to, when, there are times when a voice interface is not ideal in the sense that you want to manipulate data physically, like by kind of like gesturing.
Right. When I'm looking up something embarrassing in line at CVS, maybe I don't want voice control. Or
even better, like you just want you want to augment the voice with some actual visuals because a picture speaks 1,000 words, as we know. So that's when I'm really excited about AR kind of glasses, because then you can display something that you've queried by voice. And that's, I think, going to be the future. But to come back to HTC, like to wrap it back around, I think, I'm glad that you feel the same way as me in that sense, that I kind of felt some unease there and I could see it kind of coming. And this is definitely reinforcing that, this departure from the president of the smartphone division. And, again, we'll still see some phones for a brief period of time, but I have a feeling that these are counted for HTC making phones. And as such, it's a chapter. It's a new chapter. And
I think you're like me, that we're fans. We're fans of these different brands and what they used to represent and what they bring to the table. And so this is one of those situations where I hope I'm wrong. I hope.
Well, absolutely.
Just like I didn't figure BlackBerry could ever make the return they did with the Key 1, that HTC can surprise me again, that they can find something that makes me excited again. I want that to happen.
But that's possible, but it won't be the HTC we know today. Like in the same way as BlackBerry Mobile today is essentially TCL, and the same way as, Nokia today is essentially HMD Global. It's no longer the same company. And nothing makes it more obvious. I've been cleaning out my office for the last couple of weeks, sending back devices and stuff. And
I came
a whole,
I'm way behind.
Oh my God. No, it's so bad. Like it's been 2 years and I'm so overdue. Like I'm drowning in not enough space anymore. So, but I came across a whole bunch of Lumias that were both branded Nokia and branded Microsoft. And, it's amazing to have a phone in my hand that's not really that old, that says Nokia on it, that's Windows Phone, that I have to return to Microsoft. But, having in my other hand a Nokia HMD Global branded phone, it's like, wow, it's the same brand, but a completely different background. But I mean, there are some common threads there. A lot of the people that worked on Nokia phones back in the day, are part of HMD Global today. Totally. So it's not all lost. And so that might happen with HTC as well. Yeah.
Well, and especially that I hold some of my old Lumias, and we're going to be talking more about proper Nokia, the Nokia 7 stuff a little bit later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's just so many wasted opportunities with Windows Phone where I think they could have been a strong third place competitor, only to read this morning that they're going to be disabling the servers that provided notifications for Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8. Like, not only these things are really proper dead. I mean, they're really proper dead.
It's too bad in a way because, it's the same as like, so many devices that are based on cloud services that, when they get abandoned, they're just, they're useless, right? Like Pebble is heading in that direction very quickly. If you have a Pebble smartwatch, very soon you're not going to be able to do some of the stuff that it can do.
Because you got me into Pebble. You were like, when I saw like one of the first Pebble steals, and we were in a cab line after I think it was like a PepCom or something, and just terrible weather for a CES.
I remember that.
It's snowing, and you're showing me like how you could like call Ubers and stuff through the Pebble interface. Just like how
good times.
Just how many opportunities we had, I think, for companies to really shake up, because I don't feel that we've really captured that. My Pebble Time is still my favorite smartwatch. My actual watch experience. I don't feel like we've ever gotten the same promise from Android Wear or from Tizen.
I've just always wished for better Pebble hardware, like, OLED display and, even thinner. Like, I think Pebble Time Round is the ultimate accomplishment, I think. Even though it sacrificed some battery life, it's still to this day the thinnest smartwatch ever made.
Yeah.
It's 6.5 millimeters. And it, desperately needs a better display. I think all Pebbles do. That was my biggest gripe when I was working there. I pushed really hard for us to get a OLED instead, with
because it was really practical.
Feature.
It just wasn't pretty.
It was practical, and it certainly it was great in sunlight. But I always thought that most of us don't really spend that much time in sunlight, so it doesn't really help. But that's my opinion. But the point is that, we need, like, I want a smartwatch that's thin and light and dressy and not a sports watch or a fitness band, and that just tells me the time always without having to like tap on it or, look at it or whatever, and that has notifications that I filter and also does sports tracking just because it's good to keep track of my health. Now, to me, nobody does that way.
Have you played with any of the hybrid, like the Fossil or Skagen hybrids?
Not those two, but I've played with, a much lesser hybrid, I guess, if we want to call it that. The what was that watch from Withings before it was Nokia?
Oh, yeah, before Nokia bought them out. I don't remember what that was called.
You know the one I'm talking about. It's mechanical, but it counts your steps with a special dial. It was cool. Yeah.
So there are some really good ideas there that still need a bit of polish, but I do like my Skagen. That's my dress up.
Okay, maybe I should get
analog watch face, and then it's just got that little dial with 4 zones. So you've got an ABCD, and the little arm will just point to A or B or C, and what you've set for that zone. So if it's like a text from my wife, that's A.
Got it. Yeah.
That's my A notification right there. It still needs some work, but it's a good idea. It's an idea at least worth evolving on top of.
Yeah, I still want a real screen. Like, I still want notifications that spell out.
Right.
But I like the idea of combining that with an analog movement of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of there are watches out there that have a transparent display on top of an analog watch. I don't know who makes those, but I've seen those.
Yeah, I've seen a few prototype or like Kickstarter level solutions for that. I don't know that I've seen anything really try and crack mass market though.
No, but that's kind of what my ultimate dream would be. It's like, analog with an OLED overlay. Basically until I can get a pair of smart glasses, that would be my AR display.
Right. How funny is it that we might have like laser retinal displays before we can get a simple watch overlay screen?
Well, honestly, going back to Intel Vaunt, I think, I know a lot of the folks that work on that team because they came from Pebble's software team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Itai Fonchak is the head of that team, or at least the head of that product part of the team, and he used to be the head of design at Pebble. He's a good friend. They're a bunch of sharp guys. Anyway, and that's what I like, the simplicity of it. It's like it doesn't have a camera. It's just Bluetooth connected, and it's basically a notification engine in your eye.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what I like. Honestly, to me, it's notification. It's just having to pull my phone out of my pocket to look at what's going on is what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But I also like to filter them so that I only get the essentials.
Well, and I'm sure you've been in those conversations too, where someone is actively making fun of a smartwatch while they're being distracted by something that their phone's doing and having to pull their phone out of their pocket. Like I've had those exact interactions like, oh, I just don't think I'd be so into a smartwatch as they're breaking eye contact with me to look at their phone.
I know. Luddites, I'm telling you. But look, it's a preference thing. I never really wore a watch until I worked at Pebble. So the reality is, to me, there's no world, like a watch by itself does nothing. I need a smartwatch and I need notifications. And my second use case is, my first use case, technically my use case 0 would be with time, tell us time. Use case 1, 1 is notification. Use case 2 is some fitness or health, not even fitness, but health tracking, heart rate, number of steps, that kind of stuff, just because it's good to have a baseline and know
definitely
if I'm taking care of myself a little bit better. And sleep tracking is cool when it works well. Although I don't really like wearing something at night, so ideally I'm not sure I want that on watch.
I've stopped doing sleep tracking because my daily driver smartwatch is a Huawei, which has decent battery life, but I don't want to have to take my watch off in the middle of the day to top it back off after having used it for sleep tracking. Which again, where even just the basic like step pedometer style sensors in a Pebble, I didn't have to worry about, like I had 3 or 4 days of battery life really using it a lot. So it was a lot easier just to kind of keep it floating in the background. I think that's one of the things that is going to be a tricky answer for manufacturers to answer the question for consumers. Like, at some point, we've got to whittle back on the number of things that consumers need to manage and get back to these things sort of fitting more organically into the background of someone's day. You can ask consumers to get used to a lot, but we're all, I think, nearing the limits of our sort of personal area network bandwidth, at least from the wetware, the space between our ears, our brain's ability to keep track of this stuff and manage everything and troubleshoot everything and tech support everything. Some re-examination of how all of these things work together is probably a little overdue.
Absolutely. And look at that. We started talking about HTC and it got us into like this great philosophical discussion about the future of
well, that's the kind of conversation HTC should inspire, computing. Right?
Yeah, that's good. You're right. No, I think it's good. I support this. I'm on board. It's good. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, it's just this, it is a big piece of news. When I saw that, I was just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
I called it again. Smugness.
Right. Well, and like,
kidding.
Hate to be right about this, guys, but we did say.
Yeah, I know. All right, should we go to the next topic?
Yeah, definitely. What do we got up next?
I want to kind of continue talking about Essential a little bit. I talked about it on the last podcast because of the news of like whatever it was, 80, 90,000 units sold. Mm-hmm. But it was early in the week that we did the podcast, me and Alex from Android Central. And so, of course, literally the day after the podcast, they announced their new colors. So I just wanted to say that, they launched these 3 new colors and they're pretty cool. And if you're looking for an Essential phone still or want to buy one, there's more color choices now. Woohoo! That's basically
well, isn't this they're finally the one that I was looking at, isn't it the green and gold or green
so
and
it's
copper?
Weird because it looks more like turquoise now, like almost bluish in some, like when you see it on the photos on their site, it looks green, but then you look at it on the various reviews, like Lewis at Unbox Therapy did an unboxing and it looks more turquoise bluish to me. Mm-hmm. So I was on board when it was kind of like a forest green with gold, but now it's turquoise and gold. I could do that, but that would definitely be the color for me. Then there's like a bronze black, like it looks a black, but on certain angles it looks bronze.
Okay.
And then they have a matte, like flat black.
Now, this is actually something I wanted to throw to you because I seem to remember these color options being teased pretty heavily when
they were
when Essential was launched. And look at, we're well into this product's life cycle. We've noticed this with other manufacturers too. Like 6 months after the initial release, we'll get a red version or a blue version of the same phone. Do you think that
cough OnePlus cough?
Well, do you think that this is something that is really, like sort of building brand or maintaining brand awareness? Or do you think that if this color option had just been available at launch, that maybe the phone would have had better traction for those people who don't want another like black or white slate phone?
I don't think it would have made much of a difference. I mean, they went into the market as a niche player to start with. And, as call me maybe jaded, but the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, I mean, they didn't quite deliver on some things that were, as you know, it took a while with the camera, and even then it's still kind of iffy, and there's like some performance issues, and it still hasn't received it. Has it received its Oreo update yet or whatever?
Well, I mean, only 1% of the Android market really has.
Yeah, no, I know. But my point is, like for this kind of phone, you expect that to be, because of Andy Rubin, right? You kind of expect that to happen sooner. Look, I'm not going to bash Essential. I like their phone. I've kind of talked about it to death. I'm just saying that my gut feeling tells me that actually releasing special colors later is actually a pretty good marketing strategy. It kind of reinvigorates the brand and the product line, and it makes people potentially that didn't get around on the first round say, hey, even though this is not a new phone, this color is new, and I'm in the mood, and I'm going to pull the trigger now.
Gotcha. Well, okay, so that's actually a good point that I hadn't thought of, that if you're rejoining the conversation, it's not like you've abandoned your product. You're still putting pressure on reaching out to consumers. That side of the conversation, I think, makes sense. I just wonder if there wouldn't have been just a bit more buzz. Again, like you saw the classic days of some of our other favorite manufacturers where it's like we had a whole rainbow of color options ready to go at launch. And, if you want a blue phone, we've got an option for you. You don't have to wait for it. You don't have to plan for something that may or may not happen. It's just here. It's ready to go. And you can grab it when the excitement is at its highest.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting that we saw these colors at the launch and then they kind of disappeared. And then they kind of came back, because my first gut feeling when they launched these colors was, damn it, we just talked about Essential on the podcast yesterday. That was the first thought. Right. The second thought was, wait a minute, I've seen these colors before. What gives, right?
Right.
So, I mean, look, they look cool, and, kudos for Essential. Look, all I know is that I'm pretty sure they have a lot of money because they're well funded by Andy, friends in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So I hope they stick, and I know that I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming, as in I feel very confident that they're losing money on every phone sold right now at that $500 price point.
Oh, they have to be, yeah.
So I hope they stick around long enough because I want to see Essential PH2.
Oh, definitely.
Because I have a feeling that a lot of the issues we have are going to be solved and fixed, and then maybe it'll be interesting to see also all that other stuff they were working on that we haven't heard anything about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since the launch, like the home, the little speaker thing or whatever, home hub beastie thing.
And then I'm still curious what they can do with this sort of wireless USB connection that they're trying to use for the modular part of this phone. If there's any merit there, as we're looking at getting rid of headphone jacks and wireless charging is ubiquitous. Consumers, I think, are probably a little bit more in tune with that kind of a discussion. It's just, I don't think anyone wants to invest in a proprietary accessory standard right now.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest gripe with this is that they did it for that 360 camera. That was a disaster. Yeah. I mean, I don't have it, but I've played with it, and that little fan in there making a lot of noise, being picked up by the microphones, and it feels cheap and flimsy and plasticky compared to let's be real, the phone is so delightful, ceramic and titanium, and then they have this little plastic wart on top of it. Ugh, no, seriously.
What's funny is they're not wrong though. Have you tried shooting with the Gear 360? Because if you run the Gear 360 for more than 10 minutes, that thing starts to shut down on you because it's overheating so bad.
I know. I mean, that's a common problem. I recently, and I did a mini review for Pocketnow a little while back of the Xiaomi Sphere camera, and that one is awesome. Oh my God, the quality is so high. It does get hot, but it never shut down on me. Mm-hmm. And it can run like for several hours, even if it's plugged into a USB charger. You can keep it going as long as you have SD card space, basically.
I was also impressed with the Insta360s. They've been making
they're great. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't know. I think
So
I think that.
So here's my question. My hypothesis
I want to see them do another phone.
Has been it takes about 3 consistent generations of product before consumers start to take brands seriously. You can look at like the Microsoft Surface, Surface 1 gets hammered by the tech press. Surface 2, we see them refine. We see some people starting to recognize some good ideas. Surface Pro 3, people are starting to take it seriously as a real laptop replacement.
Oh, it was sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Essential can make it to a PH3? Do you think that they can lose fights in the market long enough before people will take them seriously? Like, the OnePlus 3 was a baller phone. That was the beautiful execution of what OnePlus was trying to do. It was finally
the right one. Yeah. Look, it's possible. They definitely have enough connections in the funding world to last that long. But the big question I would ask myself if I was a VC or funding them or whatever is, there's got to be more to the story. The stuff that they kind of hinted at last year with their own OS running on that little speaker hub thing, because, if it's just a phone you're making, it's a commodity device. Like the end game for somebody like for Nextbit was to get bought, and Razer bought them, and it made perfect sense. Because if you're making phones, you're making commodity hardware, and it's hard to differentiate if you want to run Android, because as you and I and all tech journalists and all people in their right mind know, you really want to be running pretty much stock Android anyway. Yeah. So how do you differentiate other than hardware? So the question becomes, my gut feeling is that Andy Rubin and Essential are not in the game of making phones, that the phone business is something they're doing because Andy is a phone guy, and that it's, that they've enough money long-term to, as you said, maybe by Gen 3 become good enough to sustain enough income for the real thing they're doing, which we're not seeing yet, which is what the VCs are really funding. Because otherwise, where's the business model?
Yeah.
And who's going to buy them if that's the end game? Google? No. HTC? No. I don't know. I mean, Samsung? I mean, whatever. It's like Nextbit was unique in that it was crowdfunded and it delivered mostly on time, and it had this cool cloud thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it made sense. They basically designed it from scratch to be an acquisition. It feels like to me. Whereas I don't see that written here. And knowing Andy Rubin and his past, I don't think that's necessarily what he's aiming for. He really wants to kind of steer the ship for a little while.
I completely agree with you. I think his messaging coming out saying, I was partly responsible for some of the problems facing society today in the use of smartphones. He has
Aren't you humble?
Well, again, there was a little tongue in cheeky there, but it was also with that kernel of truth.
Totally. Oh yeah, there's absolutely some truth.
I agree with you there. I completely agree with you there. I feel that there's some grander design that I think Andy Rubin is looking at, smartphone phase 2.0. Like what is it that we're really doing, and what is it that we're trying to capitalize on? But if the play is to try and build a user base or build a revenue through smartphone sales, that seems to me to be not the right way.
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Isn't it?
It's a pretty this pie's pretty well baked. There's not gonna. I don't think we're gonna see major disruption in the smartphone space like we did when Apple got in.
There's room for niche players. That's the thing. I think as phones are commoditizing, there is more room for niche players like OnePlus. The reason for that is people want a unique and different experience. You buy an Essential phone because it's ceramic and titanium and it looks unique, right, and it's small despite having a very large display. I mean, honestly, that and the Galaxy S8 regular size and the iPhone 10, in my opinion, those 3 phones are the perfect size phones.
Yeah.
Right?
I would agree.
I mean, I have bigger phones because I like bigger screens and I can handle it, but
it's not the best mobile experience. You've got to use that thing. Yeah.
And so to me, that's like that. There's a niche that they filled, and OnePlus is filling we're going to make pseudo flagships at half the price or 2/3 of the price. And they've done that. And they've made a name for themselves doing that in this market. And so I think there's room for these little players in that way, but I don't think that, it's definitely a tough and risky game to play.
Yeah. Because the margins are going to beat you up. Like they're obviously they have to be beating up Essential right now.
Yeah.
A certain bill of materials that requires a certain level of manufacturing, an expectation of QA, even though they're charging $300 less than when the thing launched. But I totally agree, though. Now is the right play to try and make an argument for a specialist device. Like, I don't think BlackBerry could have come back at any time but now, where you could say there's a niche crowd who are totally going to appreciate a keyboard phone. I think LG had the messaging mostly right for the V30. If you want a content creation and multimedia platform, it's really second to none.
It is amazing. I love my V30. And if you want to make a phone for Joshua Vergara, you're BlackBerry.
Exactly.
Right?
He never let go of his BlackBerry launcher.
You have an audience of one. No, that's mean. Gordon, Jason's probably listening going, Miriam, do I need to give you a phone call? No, look, I love the Key One, and I think BlackBerry is doing some cool stuff, and I'm looking forward to a successor to the Key One, maybe soon, who knows?
Yeah.
The reality is that it was the hipster phone to have at Google I/O this year, if you went to Google I/O.
Oh, I mean,
we all showed up with our Key Ones, and we're like,
even for this last
cool
CES, I was rocking the combo. I did.
Oh, cool!
I did all of my production. So I was there for Newegg mostly. So they had a video production team to handle like pretty video of motherboards. But I did a whole series of vlogs, all shot, recorded the audio, did all the video, did all the editing, did all the rendering, did all the uploading, did all the writing, all from the V30. Everything in-house on that one phone.
So what software did you use?
So I have become a complete and total whore for CyberLink's Power Director.
All right, that's what I figured you would say, because it really is the only platform choice
their
there is on
recent
Android.
Updates are phenomenal, though. This was one of the first platforms that properly supported HEVC. They beat Premiere, they beat Vegas, they beat Final Cut to supporting H.265. So that was a big deal for last year when I was reviewing Huawei phones, is because Google wasn't supporting HEVC, and if I wanted to upload a video, I'd have to transcode it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. The V30 does, and the iPhone 10 does, correct?
The iPhone 10 does HEVC. The V30 does not. They're still doing a super high bit rate H.264.
H.264, yeah.
So the biggies right now are Huawei. Their 4K is HEVC. Their 1080p is H.264. And the iPhone, obviously, you have your HEVC, or you can also kick it back to H.264 if you go into the compatibility settings. And then I think outside of that, it might only be Axon 7, where there was an option to use HEVC. I'm not sure if there are any other major manufacturers that have jumped on that wagon.
And this, listeners, is why you listen to this podcast, because we just went down a little yellow brick road of tangent.
Right, because better compression matters.
H.265 codecs. Woohoo! But anyway, I agree. So you had your V30 for all that, and then you got the Key One for all your writing?
Key One handled all of my communication, coordinating with different video teams, working with editors, reaching out to our press contacts. I mean, that was an all-day, everyday phone,
Fantastic.
That combo is phenomenal of just an on the rails premium top tier communications device paired with a multimedia phone that took over as my daily driver for camera and editing. Like it was an excellent combo to rock. And I didn't travel with a laptop. I didn't have another tablet. I didn't have anything else. Everything was done with those two devices. And then I made a little GorillaPod stand. So I had a little easier
hardcore.
Time. It was cool, man. It was real cool.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, look, the V30 is awesome. I love it. I love it particularly for audio.
Yeah.
The one complaint I have about recording video with the V30, at least when you're recording videos of phones, is that you can see the reflection of the laser autofocus on the glass. So that's when that happens. I use the Note 8 as a video recorder because its autofocus is super fast and it doesn't have the laser autofocus.
And also, I got to give them props for being a smaller sensor camera. I think their glass lens element mostly does what they claim it will, but every now and then I have run into, I'd say it's probably like 1 out of 20. We're in high contrast situations with very aggressive spotlighting. That lens element,
it's bad.
It freaks out, but it's really hard to predict when it's going to freak out.
I've seen it happen. Yeah, I totally agree. And so as long as you know those two limitations, they're great. Like the audio recording that comes out of that thing is unbelievably good.
It's fantastic.
So yeah.
And have you taken it out? We I had one of the prototype units for IFA, and it was like just a group of nerds out at one of those Biergarten, just giant buckets of lager the size of your torso, kinds of places. But they had an Oompa band. And for the first time you see that little notification pop up, it's the I think it's the high impact mic kicks on, and you go back and you listen to those recordings, and it's like you're there. No distortion, no clipping. It's not getting sizzly. It's just, that's almost exactly what it sounded like to my ears when I was in the room.
And you know who did that first? The MEMS based high power, like high volume mics is Nokia on the Lumias.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, we're circling ideas that Nokia had like 8 years ago, and we're still
yeah. Well, I believe that HMD Global and a lot of the technology in the current Nokia phones, which are very hard to find in the US. I mean, you can buy them on Amazon, but my point is that I still haven't gotten a review in it beyond very recently I just got this week I just got the 3310 3G retro phone. Super excited about that. But honestly, it's like I've been trying to get a Nokia 8 since it came out, and it's not that they don't want to give me one. It's just that they don't have too many to go around for the US media. But I've talked to Ben over at HMD Europe and PR, and he's assured me that he will get me a Nokia 7 Plus very, very soon. Speaking of...
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the perfect segue.
Yes.
Look at that.
Yes. Okay. Speaking of... there are more leaks about the Nokia 7 Plus. Pocketnow had an entire walkthrough. I don't think it's Pocketnow who did it, but they posted an entire walkthrough, like hands-on, right? Mm-hmm. And what's your take? I mean, this thing looks sexy in this gold and black theme.
Well, yeah, like so many really good design aesthetic experiments being executed phenomenally well. Where I do think a couple companies have struggled with this notion of how to execute this sort of slimmer form factor, this near bezel-less design. We can make excuses for other manufacturers, but we have noticed a few compromises in how they fit all of these pieces into a more screen first, or at least a much higher screen to body ratio device. And so waiting out one generation, starting HMD's Nokia labeling with 16:9 displays, I think was absolutely the right play. And especially with the 7 designation, meaning that it's not going to be their top tier offering, but like starting it off in this upper mid-range category.
Yeah, totally.
Nokia always crushed in that mid-range space.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing you have to understand is that, they did the flagships, but the model always just below the flagship was a force to be reckoned with back in the day. And it always surprised us reviewers because we were like, I could live with this. This is like freaking awesome. In some ways, I kind of like it better. Like the one that comes to mind to me is, when the Lumia 930 came out, was the last of the real Nokia branded Lumias. And at the high end, there was an 830 model.
I've got it right there. It's on my bookshelf.
Oh
it's
my
almost
God,
in arm's
that
reach
thing is still to this day, the sexiest freaking thing ever. Like, it's so thin. And I love that how it was square, but that the plastic and the glass had these cut corners. Oh, man. Nokia design. And I think HMD has inherited that vibe.
Absolutely.
They're design masters. So I'm super stoked about this 7 Plus. Honestly, I'm really hope Ben can deliver and finally get me some Nokia love again.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you are. Like, I'm vaguely on a list, but
me too.
I'm probably nowhere near executing a review or a hands-on anytime soon. I mean, I've played with them obviously quite a bit just on recent travels. and hitting trade shows and stuff. But I'd love to live with one for a while just to see.
Exactly. It's a whole different thing when, touching it at a trade show, going, like giving like Chris Velasco across from you the nod and then going,
right.
Yeah, I like this Miriam too. I agree. You can totally picture him doing that. It's one thing to do that, and then another thing to like have it in your pocket for a week.
Absolutely. Well, and it's one of those brands that I feel like, because, and I'm sure you're probably kind of in the same boat too. It's like I get a good chunk of my viewership in North America, but it's only really to the tune of about 20%. And recently, Asian markets have started taking over. I think my top viewed country right now is India.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
They're up there for me too, but not the top. US is still my top, UK my second. I think India fight is duking it out with Australia right now.
Oh, right
so
on.
I'll let you guys battle on while I watch from the sidelines. At least it's my YouTube views. I need to look at the podcast numbers. I definitely think it's US mostly though.
But I think this is where it's exciting to see companies that, I mean, at some point, I do hope they have a good North American strategy. I think a lot of companies recently have stumbled in how they introduce products for USA with the focus we have on carriers. And Nokia didn't want to play that game way back in the day, when Symbian ruled the roost for Nokia branded phones. They weren't interested in playing the same game as the unlocked markets they could tap in Europe. I really hope to see them kind of replicate some of that success again, having a strong entry-level market for emerging 4G regions on this planet, and then finally drop us off something where they can make a good faith argument for a premium option for the United States. I would love to see
absolutely.
that happen.
I mean, screw the carriers. Just release the thing unlocked, be a niche player, fight to the death as niche players. I want to see OnePlus and Honor and Nokia and who else is there? Essential and Razer, like kind of duke it out, like, dual style. Yeah, it'd be fun.
I think it just, as long as the manufacturer leadership has like reasonable expectations on what to do in a market, some of these niche options could be kings of their niche.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they could all own a little slice of it, and that's kind of the thing that I think is exciting about it, because variety ultimately is the spice of life. And, wouldn't it be simpler? And I mean, I think we're trending in that direction where more and more phones are basically, stock Android Plus, or, less skinning is happening. So basically it makes it easier for you to switch phones and feel comfortable. And that means, like, oh, do I want to do a Nokia this year? I think I'm going to do a Nokia this year. Oh, next year I'm going to do Essential again. I kind of dig their first one.
I'll be curious to see if the sort of Apple Samsung dichotomy for general consumers can be cracked into, because I think a lot of that
it's going to take a while.
Oh, it definitely will. But I think a lot of it is more the emotional side of the discussion. Like when you are saturated by, and deservedly, I do think that Samsung and Apple are making the best arguments for all-rounder consumer devices. Like, I don't really feel an iPhone necessarily excels in any one feature, but you can trust that they're genuinely good across the board. It's not like you're going to get a bad feature on an iPhone. It just might not be the best for any one part of using that phone. But, a big part of this is just the fact that those are also the two companies that spend the most on advertising. It is an emotional discussion that I think you need to kind of cue into that primal part of the human brain. And then we'll go back and we'll rationally explain why we're willing to spend $1,000 on a phone. But it's like you need to trigger the heart first before the brain can kick in and rationalize the decision.
For sure. I mean, I think that another thing that's going to be exciting this year with, and this kind of maybe segues us towards MWC a little bit. But I think with Samsung, you have to admit that even though they're a big brand like Apple and they're very successful, their hardware last year when it came out, was that's it. We're drawing the line on the ground of what the best hardware in the world is. Mm-hmm. Right. And then, it's been basically between them and Huawei and Apple. And Apple didn't make much of an effort until the 10, really. They were kind of stagnating, in my opinion, a little bit there in terms of hardware.
Well, they went 4 generations on the same phone design.
Yeah, it's a long time. So I think, it's kind of interesting to me that, as much as, Samsung is huge, but Samsung delivers, man. Like,
what I think is kind of interesting, because it's not that I disagree. It's that I think that when we look at the change from the Galaxy S6 to the S7 to the S8,
it's very incremental.
It's very incremental. Well, this is what I think is so interesting is it's almost like just 1 or 2 little tweaks make the device feel like a much bigger update than the specs on paper would otherwise indicate.
And that's the magic.
Isn't that? That is. It is. It's this sort of great, I don't want to use a phrase like sleight of hand because that makes it sound like they're doing something duplicitous. They're absolutely not. But you look at the specs on paper from the S7 to the S8, and that change is fairly conservative, except for one baller change to the screen aspect ratio, which makes this phone feel radically fresher than the change from the S6 to the S7.
Yeah. And I don't know what they have up their sleeve this time around. I mean, I have some ideas. I'm excited about that rumor of the variable aperture camera that's been floating around.
I'm very curious to see what that
Because honestly, look, software photography I'm totally digging it. I've been on board since the Lumia days, and I've always been on board just because I'm a computer nerd and I worked in video games making software for years before I was a tech journalist. But the point is that what if you throw even better hardware at that computational photography?
Yes.
Boom, right? I mean, like... And this rumor has got me I'm totally, I have a hunch that this is going to be the thing. Like last year was the display.
Yeah.
And if I'm right, I don't know, again, I don't want to predict the future because I don't know. But I'm excited about that rumor, if that rumor is true.
Now, I think Samsung has found the better solution for TikTok, where S6 to S7 feels like we're just kind of replacing some of the things we lost from the S5. We're rounding off the corners a little bit, but it's not this radical shift like the S5 to the S6 was. Then the S8 feels like a much bigger change, but there's still some rough around the edges. Fingerprint sensor location, for example, was...
Oh, God, I hope they fix that.
Was kind of wonky.
It looks like from the photos that they are.
I'm pretty confident they're going to center punch that fingerprint sensor. But now this will be the first time I think that we might see a slightly more bifurcated Galaxy lineup where we maybe don't get the secondary camera sensor on the smaller S8. And we haven't ever before faced, I think, that significant a difference in
But it makes sense to me because it's positioning yourself like Apple is.
Well, that's...
If anything.
You'll see, that's what makes sense. But hasn't Samsung always had the conversation before where you didn't have to compromise on those individual features? Yeah. It was just battery capacity and screen size. It's battery capacity because of the screen size. They've never had that kind of an ask before.
Yeah, I think they're changing their tune. I think it's working for Apple, so they're doing it. It's just the reality of it. I mean, if they are, I don't know. I mean, that's what the rumors show. The leaks are showing that, there's a much more of a differentiation between the two, for better or for worse. But look, remember that even though it doesn't, if the S9 only has one camera and the S9 Plus Edge, whatever it's called, has two, we know from the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL that you can do really good portraits with a single lens. Oh, yeah. So let's not get too worried about that.
Yeah, I don't feel like losing the zoom sensor will be too much of a compromise because you're working on such a small piece that you can't even really use in indoor lighting. I don't think people realize that usually that sensor kicks off as soon as you're not in bright direct sunlight.
It's better than the iPhone. Well, so the Note 8 and the iPhone 10 are better than the previous iPhone 7 and 8s. Because they have OIS on the zoom, so they can actually stay put in low light a little longer, right? They can actually, provide some. With my Note 8, I've done some pretty awesome low light, portraiture. So it's still much better than
it is better than the iPhone.
Able to do with an iPhone.
Second you flip it over to a Pixel or a Huawei, which has the matched
it's night and day.
Sensors, I mean, you're talking at least 3 stops of light difference between what
for sure
Samsung is capturing and what you can do on a larger sensor just through computational portraiture.
I know, for sure.
It's a huge step up. So you're not wrong. I don't think it would be too much of a loss. But again, it is kind of interesting. We'll have that first conversation of a completely different camera sensor setup from Galaxy S to Galaxy S Plus. I mean, if that turns out to be true. I wonder what that'll also mean for things like if it's variable aperture, then that's probably only going to be the main sensor, I would imagine. Like you wouldn't want to mess around with that.
Well, yeah. I mean, sensor. Why you don't? But remember also, what was it's f over 2.4 on the zoom lens on the Note 8?
I think so. Yeah. If not 1.9, I don't think.
I don't think you can do 1. I don't think you can do 1.6 on the zoom. I mean, that would be quite the achievement in terms of lens. But hey, speaking of Huawei and its ilk, I've been playing with a European version of the View 10 finally.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's kind of like a Mate 10 Redux, but they made some interesting choices. They omitted the OIS, which is, I think, a real bummer.
Yeah.
And they reduced the f-stop down to 1.8 instead of 1.6, which, if you think about it, is the same as the P10 Plus last year. So no slouch here.
Right.
But at the same time, the OIS was kind of a weird decision. But the rest of the phone, of course, other than being having the crazy Kirin 970 monster beast of a processor under the hood, which is also very Mate 10-ish. Other than that, look and feel and a lot of features are very Honor 7X-ish, which, is not a bad thing because the Honor 7X is a freaking awesome phone for $200.
It really is well built.
And so this View 10, I don't know exactly when it's going to come on, what the exact price is going to be. We've all kind of guessing it's going to be 500-ish. And I think it's coming to the US very soon. And it's going to be in that 500-ish range, competing directly with the OnePlus 5T.
I think that's a really smart play because I
think it is.
There were a bunch of people making those sort of bullet point comparisons between the Mate 10 Pro and the OnePlus 5T. You've got similar generations of processor. You've got 1080p displays. The individual mini bullet point differences, started to make the Mate 10 Pro look a little bit pricier than what the phone could offer.
Should be or could be, yeah.
And so the View 10 comes in, I think, at exactly the right stage in the conversation to really give the 5T a run for its money, especially in light of the recent political troubles that Huawei was facing with their actual Huawei brand.
Yeah, so Honor could kind of side skirt that in a clever way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. No, I mean, it's a fun phone. I've only had it for a brief time, so I know we're going to get some V10, View 10, whatever. It's not V, it's View.
Right.
View 10 US review units eventually, but it was interesting because, some of the European reviewers reviewed them a while ago, so I was like, I want to kind of get my hands on that.
Well, did you spend a lot of time with the Mate 10? Because that's actually...
Yeah, I have one. I have a Mate 10 Pro. I've been using the European model since November. Late November, early December. So I've had it in my pocket for a while. Yeah, I love it. It's good.
I've been very impressed with Huawei's recent changes. I miss having a built-in headphone jack. I can't front that.
Well, the View 10 does. So there you go.
Exactly. I was going to say, like,
so basically,
back
if you
to
look
Honor.
if you look at the Mate 10 Pro, there's also a Mate 10 that doesn't have water resistant, has SD card, and has headphone jack. And has a 16:9 aspect ratio. So basically, take the Mate 10 non-Pro, the one I just described, and give it an 18:9 display, and that's what the View 10 is, with a Redux camera in terms of no OIS and a lesser f-stop.
That's not a bad...
That's not bad, right?
If they really can be that aggressive, that price
6 gigs of RAM
against the OnePlus, then I think that's a really worthy showdown. And I'd really be curious to see what they're doing with the camera tech losing OIS, because I didn't feel
it hurts in low light.
It does, but I didn't feel it was as bad a loss as when I was going through the P9 and the Honor 8. You definitely notice it, you definitely miss it, but it wasn't as destructive to nighttime photography as I thought it was going to be.
It's depends how steady you can be. Of course, for me, that's not a problem. But again, the average person just mashing the button, they're going to see a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely make jokes about the fact that it's a good thing I'm not a surgeon. So,
so yeah, if listeners are interested, I've got a little preview of that View 10 European model in my YouTube channel, and we talked about the Nokia 3310 3G retro phone, and there's an unboxing of that as well. I'll put it in the show notes. But we've got a little bit of time left here before we got to run, and I wanted to really quickly get your kind of like 5 bullet point version of what you expect to see happen in MWC.
Oh, definitely. So my quick rundown, at least the top companies that I'm going to be paying attention to for the mobile space. Obviously, Samsung is going to walk away with most of the editorial.
The attention. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's if only it's just because to see Samsung return to MWC and not
right,
do their own completely separate event after. You know, they're not facing the competition from outlets like LG. So this is the right time, especially with the phone that I feel will be, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's going to be a little iterative. The S8 got so much right. There's not a lot I feel they need to correct on the S9.
True.
It's going to be about refining, just putting a few pieces back into place. I think that's going to be a really smart play for Samsung, especially with part of the conversation also kind of owing to price creep. I think we'll probably see that little bit of a lobster pot on pricing again for what Samsung has to offer. So there are some things that I think they need to kind of focus on their part of the discussion. I think that leaves a huge opportunity, though, for Huawei for the world stage, because they're not facing the same kind of scrutiny outside of the United States. You know, I don't think the Best Buy problem is affecting them worldwide. I don't think the U.S., law enforcement agencies advisory is affecting them worldwide. I think the only thing which might be a tough hill for the P20 is if it is too close in aesthetic design to an iPhone 10. Some of the renders that we've seen, some of the leaks that we've seen, if you praise your competitor too much, you flatter them too much in your design, I think that makes for a difficult conversation as to why a consumer should pick you over the competitor that you're obviously flattering. So
yeah, look, I agree with you. I mean, for me, the P10 and P10 Plus in terms of industrial design were a huge disappointment. They lost their design language last year, and they went with this kind of iPhone clone Me Too thing. And they did not like it.
They had some good ideas which were not very well implemented into an iPhone style design language, like that micro etched back on the blue P10.
Oh, it's great.
That was really cool. That was a really good idea. I want something shiny, and I don't want it to pick up a whole bunch of fingerprint smudges.
They did spend too much time talking about colors.
Oh yeah, their Pantone relationship.
Oh God, that was painful.
So I can appreciate them looking at like, okay, well, we kind of did this halfway iPhone clone meets something radical in terms of material. But if they veer too far into, well, let's just jump whole hog into an iPhone celebration, I think that's going to be a difficult ask. I don't think it'll be for a lack of cool tech, because Huawei has been ahead of the curve for the last 2 years. You want neural processing on a chipset, you had it months before Qualcomm could deliver. You wanted Qualcomm 835 level performance, you could have had it months before on the Mate 9. They've been on the pulse, if not leading parts of the market in a way that I don't think North Americans always fully appreciate. So
I don't think North Americans fully appreciate Huawei, period.
Not at all. This is definitely, I think, their opportunity to take the world stage and only face Samsung as the major conversation point. That could be big. The other one,
will they?
Go ahead.
Will they show the P20? I mean, I thought they were going to, there's some event in Paris later in March. I don't think we're going to necessarily see anything about that at MWC though.
Well, because you're probably right there. I'm hoping though. I'm hoping that we're not completely absent the conversation because you have all the press there.
I know, it's like a missed opportunity, wouldn't it be?
You know, I mean, even if they're not ready, because you're right, the March event in Paris is probably when everyone's going to get to go hands on. But this would be the right time to tease. This would be the right time to start getting people excited, because they're at MWC. They are going to be announcing something.
It would be crazy.
Yeah,
if they didn't.
To not have a part of that discussion be, oh, and here's what's coming. I think would be kind of a shame. The other companies that I think we're going to see some cool stuff from, I think Xiaomi with the Mi Mix. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Didn't they just announce a Mi Mix 2 Plus or S or something?
Yeah, it's the one. Have you seen the renders with the corner cutout?
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
So, we've been talking about Android P having better support for differing screen form factors, notches, no notches. If you want to cut into the display, I think Xiaomi has the best way to do it. I am not a fan of the notch. I think the notch is terrible design. Even if it's functional, I think it's wrong to cut into the most used aspect of a phone display to beef up something like your selfie camera. And I know a lot of people disagree with me. I put out a video editorial where a ton of people called me an idiot, but I'm currently going through this process. Like, I'm reaching out to some of my favorite YouTubers to see if we can work together on some good best practices on utilizing taller aspect ratio screens, but not sacrificing the video experience for people who are still mostly 16:9. And it's a really difficult conversation to have, is like, if I want you to zoom in on my video, then I know you're cropping out the top and bottom of my video frame, but I don't want that to just be empty space for someone who has a more rectangular, squarer screen. And so we're trying to find some kind of way to balance that. Like, if you want to use the full screen on your phone, our video will still look good and you won't miss out on things.
Exactly.
If I do that and then I send that video over to an iPhone 10, then I lose out on that little bit of the chunk from the unibrow, and that makes me kind of sad. So the
notch is a bit weird. I'm used to it. I don't mind it, but I understand the design. From a design perspective, it's really odd that came from Apple.
Yeah. Well, and that for Apple having been the company, like, this screen is your portal to these services and the phone should get out of the way. Then now the phone is literally in the way.
In your way.
Yeah. So it's those kinds of things. Like, if you're going to do the notch, I think you have an easier time on Android because of the way that you can reorganize space on the notification bar. But even for some of these leaks and renders that we've seen from other devices, the Mi Mix 2, I think, absolutely nails that notion of this. The camera has to cut into the notification bar, but it's way off to the side. And it's going to have very minimal impact on the content that you consume. So I'll be really excited to see that in the flesh, if that's executed as well as the renders and leaks look.
So you know what's next, right? Obviously. Camera under the display, like a fingerprint reader under the display.
Because, look at the lie of science fiction.
The screen goes black in that section while the photo gets taken. You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, but the lie of science fiction has been you can dial up a video call and make eye contact with the person that you're talking to. So I want that webcam to be center punched in the middle of the screen where I would normally frame, and I can look directly into that part of the screen and actually talk to the person, look at the person I'm talking to at the same time.
That would be very cool.
If we can pull off fingerprint sensors under the screen, it can't be too far out.
I think it's coming.
I think it has to be. The last two companies that I'm really excited to see from are ZTE. If we get a proper follow-up to the Axon 7, especially something that can focus on audio.
Have you heard anything? I reached out to them about MWC. I haven't heard back, so I don't know what's going on there.
They were
don't know them very well. So.
After the Axon M.
Okay.
It was it was brave of them. If we want to talk about courage in smartphone manufacturing, it was brave
to
of
do
them
what they did,
to jump on dual screens before I think Android could properly support it. I think one of the things that people are overlooking for Android P is, it's going to support the notch, but if you can make Android more intelligent at different form factors, it makes this of modular or foldable screens. It makes that easier. It's going to make it way easier to plug your phone into an external monitor and have Android properly support the space of a more desktop style computing environment, not having to go to a Samsung DeX proprietary solution, just bake that directly in. I know, who was it? Bloomberg. Did you see the Bloomberg video piece?
No, about which?
So they dedicated 2 minutes of airtime to Android P. And it was basically Android's just going to copy Apple. It's all about the notch. And you're like, no, No, Android P is going to have a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, Jesus.
But it was all just like, see, here's another Google copies Apple, and they're going to copy the notch. And you're like, that's not at all what we're talking about for that.
It's Bloomberg. That's all I have to say.
But lastly, for MWC, if we can get the Axon 9 and have killer headphone audio, that'll be great. I'll also be curious to see if Alcatel can make another strong play for the entry level. Because I love the Idol. I think it's a great option.
I like the Idol line too. I'm just worried that they're not going to be able to compete with something like the Honor 7X. That thing slays so hard for, it punches way above its price point, in my opinion, for what it is. It's only missing NFC and a USB Type-C and maybe an Android One build to be kind of the perfect phone in that price point.
But did you play with the Idol 5 though? Stereo speakers on a $200 phone? That's not bad.
Yeah, I played with it, but I feel it's too plasticky. Like at this price point, I now expect
glass.
All metal.
Metal edges and a glass back? Come on. I know you like glasses premium.
I thought it looked like plastic to me.
Oh, it doesn't look like glass. But no, it is I'm pretty sure it is a glass back phone.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I want to root for Alcatel. I've always liked what they've done, but I feel that in the last few years they've just been kind of under-delivering compared to, considering how much of a, they have a lot of good backing with TCL at the helm, and the displays should be, best in class coming from TCL now, since TCL is making their own panels.
That's definitely, I think, one of the biggest asks on the Idol 5 is the screen does feel like a compromise. I am pretty sure it's 1080p, but color, clarity, contrast, that makes you feel like you are using a $200 phone. For as much as I love that the speakers elevate that product category, what you interact with the most does feel like a compromise.
No, I thought you were talking about a new replacement for the Idol 5. Well, that's what I thought you were talking about.
I think their next line of phones, they're going to drop the Idol name.
The Idol name.
Yeah, so it'll be the
definitely the Idol 5 is definitely a glass and metal phone. I'm just saying that I'm worried that there's mid-rangers are not going to be continuing that trend. And because I don't know why, because I feel like their cheaper phones have always been so plasticky. Yeah. And, maybe one of them will be continuing that. But, let me turn that around and say that I think they should continue in that line of design, but I'm not convinced that they will.
Oh, I'm not either. In fact, I think they'll probably try and jump on the skinnier bezel bandwagon. Unfortunately, I think we'll lose one of the features that Alcatel...
And that's my concern. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to meet the kind of, feature set. Like they're going to drop the build and material level things because that's all they can do to stay competitive. And I'm just not too happy about that. But at the same time, I want my 18.9 display. I expect everything to have an 18.9 display from now on. Done.
Well, and unfortunately, I think we'll probably also lose one of the things that made the Idol distinctive is the audio. If the phone becomes another also ran, the same problem that we were just discussing earlier with HTC is when you walk away from something that made your brand distinctive, how does it stand out against established players like Moto Gs and Honor 7s, Honor 6s that really kind of helped elevate the sub $300 price tier to something far less painful for consumers to use? One of the differentiators was stereo speakers on the Idol 5. You could make an argument, hey, if you really wanted great audio for games and for music and for watching videos, this phone delivered something that no one else did at this price point. If it's now just going to be another Honor 7 clone, then why not just go with the Honor 7?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you made some good points, and I believe that your predictions are pretty much on point. Those are some of the things I'm looking forward to as well. But we should wrap it up, and I wanted to give you a chance to plug. You did plug yourself a little bit at the beginning, but tell people where they can find you on Twitter. What URLs they should go visit to see your work with Newegg and Pocketnow and stuff. And all that. Yeah,
definitely. So around the internet, if you search for Some Gadget Guy, you'll probably find me in some shape some form, some factor. Newegg Now every Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, where we're doing all kinds of crazy deals on gadgets and electronics, and I co-host that with Trisha Hirschberger. And we've done some crazy things, like we found a whole batch of graphics cards that we were able to sell below MSRP for like the first time in months. So you can definitely find some cool stuff there. My personal YouTube channel, youtube.com/Juan Bagnell, but you can also find it by searching for Some Gadget Guy. Right before I jumped on this podcast, I just did a debate with Ron Richards from All About Android and
Ron, awesome.
Where we hashed it out. We got into it, the nitty gritty on companies getting rid of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And because, Ron has been a big advocate of moving over to Bluetooth, and Enabong has got his wall of headphones behind him in every shot he does. It's a pretty epic debate. And I'll also be doing a showdown between portrait mode on phones like the Mate 10 Pro against interchangeable lens cameras to see if those portrait mode photos really do resemble what they're trying to do. That depth of field, that really pleasant lens effect that we get from proper glass. And so that'll be out on my channel probably after this podcast goes live. So some cool stuff coming down the pipe. Is going to be a lot of fun to follow.
Sweet. Well, all know where to find Juan, and you know where to find me. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character, just drop the vowels in that. You'll find me in most places. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that for YouTube, so just look for me as my full name, youtube.com/Miriam Jouar. You'll find some videos that supplement this podcast. And then, of course, subscribe to that channel, like the videos, that would help. And you should subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. mobiletechpodcast.com will give you the RSS feed, and then you can find us on iTunes and on Pocket Casts and a bunch of other podcast aggregators, I'm sure. Stay tuned for next week. We'll have someone else. We'll be at MWC. Probably we'll have a whole bunch of people like we did at CS and gather all in a room. It'll be fun. And again, Juan, thanks for being on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about your MWC podcast. Your CES show was awesome. So
it was great, right? Yeah. We'll do something similar, I hope. So stay tuned for that, and see you next week.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.